Hi doll faces. I've been thinking lately about the incredible value of comparing tarot cards from different decks and looking at how the different decks actually choose to portray or bring out or accentuate different parts of the theme or energy of each card, and how that can actually vary from deck to deck, which is a really interesting part of my tarot study this year, and I'm hoping to get more heavily into it as time goes on. But making these comparisons is really fulfilling. It really makes me think more about what I actually resonate with more in each card, and which themes and energies I might need to consider more carefully as I move forward. So I just wanted to share some thoughts with you. As you guys know, I'm a hardcore Waite loyalist, and I've only recently started to play with and collect new decks and open myself up to new tarot decks. I am an oracle card girl as well. I do love oracle cards and angel cards and things like that. But with regard to the classic 78 card deck, I do favour Waite, and I've kind of kept it like jealously guarded, this relationship I have with the Waite, which actually has been somewhat unfortunate in terms of me not opening myself up to other imagery as much as I perhaps would have liked to in the past. So I'm really opening myself up to that now, and it's been a really exciting exploration so far. I have worked with other decks before. I actually started my tarot exploration in earnest with a mythic tarot deck, and that was after owning the Marseille deck for quite some time but never really getting into it because it just looks like a deck of playing cards really. The imagery isn't all that inspiring. So yeah, I started with the mythic tarot, and then as soon as I went on to Waite, it was almost like there was a shutdown there for me, and I was just really comfortable with that deck. It wasn't necessarily a fear of trying out other imagery. I just got very comfortable. So it's nice to be out of my comfort zone, and I'd like to take you on a little journey of what it's like to actually compare different decks for me. So I decided to begin with the Five of Pentacles, because I really feel that there are some differences here with these three decks, and that was something that I wanted to explore. The Five of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite is really an image of poverty and sickness and destitution, rejection maybe from wider society. And I always feel that when people have a very negative view of this card, I always tend to remind them that in essence what we're looking at here really, when we kind of peel back the surface image, is a connection which is based around camaraderie. It's two people that are sticking together. They are as low as they can possibly be. They're obviously in trouble. They've obviously got no money. They're obviously out in the cold and not adequately dressed for the cold, etc. But they're together. They've got that empathy. They've got that connection. They've got that feeling of not necessarily being alone. And that's kind of the upside of the Five of Pentacles, and it makes us think more potentially about our external support systems. Who's there for us? Who can we turn to for guidance? Can we, in a sense, be our own friends and be our own support systems? When we are alone and in solitude, do we feel lonely, or do we feel that there is this sense of empowerment that comes from being one with ourselves and having a good relationship with ourselves? So I feel like that's kind of the theme that I go with the Rider-Waite. Obviously there is a lot of instability and a lot of fear and a lot of fragility and vulnerability there, but I always feel that there is this empathy and there is this sense of standing strong and being with yourself, and also taking the external support that you feel you need. The Five of Pentacles in Gypsy Palace Tarot, I've noticed a few people say that they can't necessarily connect it to anything, which they would normally connect with an ordinary Five of Pentacles in another deck maybe. And that's kind of interesting to me, because in a sense what I thought of when I saw it was that it's much more the upside of the five. This guy's defending this woman that he's with. He's got a protective arm out in front of her. She herself seems pretty strong, pretty prepared to kick ass. They both seem kind of one. They're wearing similar things. They look like they're part of a team. They look like they've got an idea. They look like they've got a direction. And it's almost as though they are together against the world kind of thing. So it's actually more of a joyful image, I think, of that same camaraderie, that same sense of union, that same sense of unity and of the two. But I feel in a sense almost as if they've kind of got more of a plan. They've got more of an inner confidence. They kind of exude something which is dependable and potentially also joyful, or could lead them towards joy. So I feel when I draw this card quite often that I'm really focusing on, what the querent has got at their disposal. What is their plan? What is their direction? How can they connect with their sense of self, with their sense of personal power, with their sense of not leaving behind their authenticity and their right to live as they want to live, just because, you know, things might not necessarily be on the up and up for them. So I kind of view those two as being the same but different in a sense. And then with the Manga Tarot, the Five of Pentacles is really about making an offering. It's about these two people are kind of praying or meditating or kind of giving offerings to this kind of little statuette thing, which clearly symbolises money and prosperity and abundance and all that stuff, because the pentacles are kind of nailed onto its little altar there. So I feel with this, it's more about surrender. It's more about accepting the circumstances, and kind of almost hitting one's knees and throwing one's hands up, kind of leaving it open to the universe and saying, look, I will control what's within my control. I'll do my part, and I'm going to leave the rest up to spirit. I'm going to leave the rest up to the universe. It's almost like the confidence in divine timing, and the confidence in kind of the feeling, almost that positive feeling of prayer. You know, prayer can be so positive, that feeling of just of putting your hands up towards the sky and closing your eyes and saying, you know, if it's in my highest good, then let the perfect resources come to me at the perfect time. I'm ready, I'm open, I'm willing to learn from this experience. So I really feel that there's that sense of surrender, and almost of not kind of prioritizing empowerment so much, but actually prioritizing that sense of flow and actually going with that flow rather than being in resistance to it. So I think there's a markedly different vibe from the other two. So it's still that same central theme, but there's really this markedly different vibe with the 5 in the Manga Tarot, which I love. Now I'm going to move on to the Hierophant, the Hermit. The Hermit in Gypsy Palace Tarot is beautiful. I've talked about it before in my rundown of the majors in Gypsy Palace. It's just stunning. And what I really feel about the Hermit is, first of all, the Hermit is female in this deck, and the female appears to be one walking on the water, which, you know, has obvious connotations in terms of, you know, one's holiness and one's ability to kind of move themselves into transcendental territory, etc., if you want to go for that biblical vibe. But I also feel that she's kind of preparing to jump into the ocean, and from a Jungian standpoint, the ocean is the psyche, the depths of the psyche, the untapped and uncontrolled and unexplored depths of the psyche in many cases, the unconscious. So I really feel that this is more about an emotional journey, an emotional pilgrimage, a pilgrimage to understand self in terms of emotional healing, potentially, an emotional evolution, turning away from negative cycles, understanding the root causes of limiting beliefs, and then seeking to actually jump beyond them. So she knows she needs to jump in before she can jump out. I kind of feel that's the vibe there. And I also feel that there's an incredible level of positivity here. I mean, the colours speak for themselves. They're so visceral, they're so inviting. It's an exciting beginning to a journey that's only going to get kind of exponentially deeper, if you like. The Hermit in Rider Waite, of course, is much more kind of minimalist. And I feel that it has that ascetic quality to it. It has that feeling of leaving earthly possessions behind, of making do only with what you need, with recognising that you don't need all of this stuff, recognising that the answers are within you. And I also feel that there's much more a sense of solitude and isolation here, necessary isolation in order to produce spiritual results, which you don't get so much with the Hermit in Gypsy Palace, where you almost feel like she has all of these friendly animal companions, and, you know, she's involved in this very colourful world that she is choosing to learn from, whereas I feel the Hermit is almost, he's left the world, he's ascended up the mountain, and he's decided to be in complete isolation, to be an ascetic, to be other to what society expects and other to what society pushes upon people. So I feel there is that kind of minimalist feeling of leaving everything behind and just being very austere, very simplistic about things, and going inward to the point where there is kind of no outward stimulus. Everything is within, everything is stillness, silence and solitude. So that's kind of the difference that I feel there. The Hermit in Manga Tarot is really interesting because I'm not going to be able to actually get close enough to show the face, but the whites of the eyes in the Hermit in Manga Tarot are kind of a bit freaky. Like the guy doesn't appear to have any pupils, it's just like the whites of his eyes, which to me kind of represents trance and kind of represents being completely out of this world kind of thing. And there are shards of bright light all around. So I kind of feel almost that this has a magical quality, and it embodies for me the empowerment of being able to manifest, being able to make things happen, having the power so innately within you and knowing how to use it, how to direct it, how to harness it, and how to send it forth appropriately. That it's almost like the end of the hermit journey in a sense. I feel like this hermit has, I suppose you could call it, ascended or reached illumination, or whichever kind of term you want to use, but I feel like that's the vibe I get with the hermit in Manga, is that the hermit has actually self-actualized. He's accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. And I think that's something really cool about the hermit with Manga Tarot, that I don't feel that it's the beginning so much as I feel that it's the end, and I feel that something has been accomplished which is incredibly powerful and incredibly potent, and is, in the right hands with this guy. This guy has done the necessary work to get to that point. So that's quite exciting with that card, I think. Oh, I'm pelling the cloth. Okay. So the final card that I wanted to discuss was the Six of Swords. No real reason. I just decided, to select 3 groups of cards and just talk through. Now, the Six of Swords in Rider-Waite, we have this feeling of moving on. We have this feeling of gathering up our possessions, almost fleeing under cover of darkness in a sense. I know it's not dark, but there's that feeling of like doing a moonlight flit, just going with, the possessions that you need in that moment, and like accepting that something is over and you're moving on to the new place. And I almost don't feel a sense of joy necessarily with this card, and I don't think many people do. I think it's almost an acceptance that what's done is done, and there's no way to kind of return to it and make it go another way. There's this acceptance that it's now time to move on to the new terrain. And I feel some sense of vulnerability sometimes with this card. It depends on the reading I'm doing and the client I'm working with and the energies that I personally feel come out. But I also feel that, the representation of the ocean, which I always think of to be the psyche, the untapped part of the psyche, the depths that it really can go to. I often feel that these 2 figures in the boat are almost not yet ready, potentially, to go down into that water. They are going over the water, kind of knowing that at one point they are going to have to address it and dive into it, but they can't do it at this moment in time. There's that sense that, first of all, they need to lay some strong foundations. They need to make sure everything is okay, materially speaking. They need to get onto that new platform. And then after that, maybe they can kind of go deeper and they can actually explore. So I do feel there's a sense of vulnerability there, and there's a sense of being able to prioritise. When you're in a shift, when your life is in flux, you must be able to prioritise what's what and decide what it is that's going to be most important to you at that point. So it's about self-preservation and self-care in a sense, I suppose, too. And sometimes I feel like they're fleeing from danger, either emotional danger or physical danger. The Six of Swords in Gypsy Palace is, again, totally beautiful in terms of colours and in terms of composition. There are no other figures there. There's just this person that's kind of turning away from this huge explosion of colour and kind of looking down into this other space where there doesn't seem to be as much chaos and as much colour. So I kind of feel that it's almost more of an emotional acceptance before you make any changes in the tangible realm. I feel it's almost a moment of extreme illumination that happens in this person's head, whereby it's the moment they realise, I can't go on like this. It's radical acceptance. I kind of feel like this card represents radical acceptance, and that really excites me about it. I think it's almost like, those cartoons with the light bulb above the cartoon character's head. I feel this is a very poetic and emotional and visceral representation of the same thing happening in somebody's emotional terrain, where they really feel like, okay, I've just realised I don't want this anymore. I've just realised I can't go on like this. I've just realised there's a better way. So that's kind of what I get from the Gypsy Palace Six of Swords. And then moving over to Manga. Manga is very interesting because you've got the same vibe of the boat and the people on the boat as you do with Rider-Waite. But with this, the guy is pointing his sword down into the water, and there are other swords beneath the water. So he's holding on to one, and the other 5 swords are beneath the water. And it's almost as though he's not necessarily trying to get them out. I mean, he could be. You could see it that way if you wanted to. But to me, it's almost like he's pointing at them as if to say, this is past now. This isn't what we're going towards. This is what we're sailing over, kind of thing. We're going to a new place. But sometimes you could look at it and see that he's trying to obtain the swords, I suppose. He's trying to get something back. So it really depends how you read it and what the reading that you're doing is all about, in terms of what you're trying to get from it and which energies you're trying to connect with. But I do think it's very interesting that these two are so closely related. And yet with this one, it's almost like a point is trying to be made, because with this one, the swords are actually on the boat. It's like, okay, we're traveling with this stuff, whatever this stuff may be. If you want to think of swords as representing, for example, your thoughts, your beliefs, the way you rationalize things, the way you see yourself and the world. With this, I almost feel like there's been a casting off of that. It's almost like beginner's mind. And I guess that's how I could see it. I'm sure it's obvious that I'm not as closely bonded to this card yet as I am with the others, but I will get there, and that's part of the joy of it, right? That is part of the joy of doing this kind of exploration where you are looking at different decks and you're trying to decide what the differences are, what the similarities are, and why the imagery speaks to you in the way it does, and what that helps you to learn about the underlying energy of any card overall. Because of course all of these different cards, these different decks that we use, they are just different portals according to one person or a few people's consciousness. So really, when you look at the meanings of tarot cards and then you look at tarot cards themselves, it's kind of the way you look at the meanings of archetypes, and then you look at the way different archetypes are described or written out or painted or projected in some sense by consciousness. Those images are only ever going to be crude surface interpretations of the underlying energy. The underlying energy is infinite. The underlying energy can only be experienced by emotion. It can only be felt. It can't really be looked at. So looking at tarot cards and getting what you can get from the surface imagery, that's just the beginning. And that's what really excites me about comparing cards from different decks, is that it makes me realise that there is so much deeper to go, and that, the energy of each card is so unbelievably multifaceted. And that really is part of my journey at the moment with tarot. And I hope your own tarot journeys are going beautifully. Much love. Blessed be.